July 1944. Normandy, France. Watch this Sherman tank. It's climbing that wall of earthen roots. And right now, there's less than an inch of steel between that crew and death, because on the other side, a German anti-tank team is waiting. Every man on both sides of that hedgerow knew the math. The belly was exposed, the gun was pointing at the sky, and the Germans had figured out exactly what to do about it. They waited. They let the tank commit to the climb. Then they fired. When a Sherman rode up a hedgerow, the belly went up first, less than an inch of steel in places and as thin as half an inch at the rear. The gun pointed skyward. Useless. 3 seconds. That was sometimes all it took. Penetrated Shermans could ignite fast. The crews knew it. Every man in every tank in Normandy knew it. This was the nightmare of the Norman hedgerows. In some sectors, the U.S. Army was losing 900 men for every kilometer they advanced. By mid-July, 6 weeks after D-Day, the advance hadn't slowed. It had stalled. Progress was measured in yards, not miles, yards. The Bocage wasn't just bushes. Americans made that mistake once. These were ancient property lines, some dated back to Roman times. Farmers had piled stones and earth along field edges for over 1,000 years. The base, 3 to 5 feet of solid earthen berm, packed with rocks and bound by roots. On top of that, another 10 to 15 feet of tangled vegetation. Hawthorn, blackthorn, oak trees with roots like steel cables. And there wasn't just one hedgerow. There were dozens of them, crisscrossing every mile of Norman farmland. The roads between fields had been worn down by centuries of cart traffic, turning them into pre-dug trenches. Perfect for German defenders. The Germans didn't need to build fortifications. Normandy already was one. American commanders thought tanks would solve the problem, push through the hedges, use 30 tons of steel to flatten ancient bushes. They were wrong. When a Sherman hit a hedgerow, it couldn't push through the root-bound earth. Instead, it rode up, 30 to 45-degree angle. The main gun, pointing at the sky. Useless. The belly, completely exposed to anyone waiting on the other side. Front armor, 2 to 3 inches. The belly, less than an inch in places. German anti-tank teams let the Americans commit to the climb, then fired a Panzerfaust straight into the floor. It worked every time. Across Normandy, the pattern repeated. Wait for the climb, fire into the floor. The Bocage had become a killing field. Penetrated Shermans could ignite fast, and the crews knew it. By mid-July, 6 weeks after D-Day, the advance had stalled, not slowed. Stalled. A surgeon at the front described it: the dead, the wounded, and the living packed as tightly as cigars. Progress was measured in yards, not miles. Yards. The 8th Corps spent 12 days fighting through the Bocage, 10,000 casualties, 11 kilometers. That's almost 1,000 men for every kilometer gained. At St. Lo, the 19th Corps lost 11,000 men in 2 weeks, 3,000 of them killed. Across all of the Bocage fighting, the U.S. Army suffered tens of thousands of casualties. Some estimates put the total near 40,000 killed, wounded, missing. Washington had no solution. The Pentagon's best engineers couldn't crack it. General Omar Bradley called it the damndest country I've seen. The great advance that was supposed to liberate France was dying in the dirt of Normandy, hedgerow by hedgerow, tank by tank, man by man. But the answer wouldn't come from Washington. It wouldn't come from generals or engineers. It would come from a gripe session in a motor pool. The 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron was a New Jersey National Guard unit. They called themselves the Essex Troop. It was July 1944. Another bull session, men griping about the hedgerows, about friends they'd lost, about how nothing worked against those walls of earth and roots. That's when a private spoke up. Private First Class Clarence G. Roberts, a self-described hillbilly from Tennessee, looked around the group and said, "Why don't we get some saw teeth and put them on the front of the tank and cut through these hedges?" The other men laughed, called it a crackpot scheme, a hillbilly pipe dream. Among them was Sergeant Curtis Grub Cullen III, 29 years old, which made him a dinosaur compared to the teenage replacements flooding into Normandy. Before the war, Cullen had been a salesman. He'd worked for Schenley Industries, a liquor distributor in New York. He wasn't an engineer, wasn't an officer, wasn't anyone special on paper, just a cavalry sergeant who'd learned to pay attention and to listen when other men talked. But Sergeant Cullen didn't laugh. While the others joked, Cullen grabbed a pencil and started sketching. What happened next would take less than 24 hours and change the entire war. Cullen knew exactly where to get the steel. The beaches. Rommel had planted thousands of Czech hedgehogs along the Normandy coast, steel I-beams welded into X-shapes designed to rip the bottoms out of Allied landing craft. Now those obstacles were just sitting there. Scrap! Hundreds of tons of high-quality steel. Just sitting there on the beaches. The very steel the Germans had placed to stop the invasion was about to break their defenses wide open. Cullen and his team worked through the night. No orders from above, no requisition forms, just soldiers with a problem and a possible solution. His maintenance officer, Lieutenant Lytton, helped design the attachment points. They used arc welders powered by maintenance trucks. Cut the hedgehog steel into tusks. The design was crude. 4 to 6 steel prongs, each about 2 to 3 feet long, welded directly to the front hull. No Pentagon approval, no committee, no budget. They mounted the first prototype on an M5A1 Stuart, a light tank that was easier to modify. By morning, they had something that looked like a cross between a forklift and a medieval battering ram. The first unofficial test, the Stuart lined up on a hedgerow and accelerated. The tusks hit first, dug into the earthen bank, and instead of riding up, the tank pushed through. The nose stayed down. The belly stayed protected. The gun stayed level. Earth exploded over the turret. Ancient roots snapped like rifle fire. And the tank emerged on the other side. Intact. Gun ready. Crew alive. The crackpot scheme worked. Word traveled fast. Within days, General Omar Bradley, commander of the First Army, agreed to attend a demonstration. July 14, 1944. A field near Saint-Jean-de-Day. Bradley stood with his staff. No one was smiling. They'd seen too many solutions fail. The Sherman accelerated, hit the hedgerow at speed, the tusks bit into the berm, the tracks kept traction, and the Sherman plowed through, not over, through. Bradley watched in silence. One aide described him as dumbstruck. Then he walked over to Sergeant Cullen. Right there in the field, Bradley pinned a Legion of Merit on Cullen's chest. Then came the order that would change everything. Build as many as you can. Operation Cobra launches in 11 days. 11 days. Ordnance crews across First Army went to work, 48-hour shifts, no breaks. They set up welding stations in barns, in apple orchards, in any rear area space they could find. Colonel John Madaris coordinated the effort. His ordnance teams turned out devices as fast as they could weld them. When local welding supplies ran low, Madaris made a call. That night, transport aircraft flew welding equipment across the English Channel. The same army that couldn't cross a hedgerow was now airlifting supplies from England to keep the welders running. Production never stopped. By July 24th, over 500 Rhino devices had been built. Roughly 60% of First Army's Shermans were modified, ready to punch through the Bocage. Bradley gave one more order. No Rhino tank could be used before Cobra. Not one. If the Germans spotted the modification, they'd stop mining the roads and start mining the fields. The entire advantage would be lost, so the modified tanks stayed hidden. Under camouflage nets, in shadows, away from German eyes. For 11 days, the secret held. On July 25, 1944, the secret would be unleashed. Dawn, July 25th. The air felt heavy. At 09:38 hours, the first wave of aircraft filled the sky. Fighter bombers dove on German positions. Then came the heavies, over 1,500 bombers, B-17 and B-24s, wave after wave. They dropped more than 4,000 tons of explosives on a 7,000-yard front. The ground shook for miles, but the bombing wasn't perfect. Short rounds fell on American lines. 111 U.S. soldiers were killed by their own aircraft, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American killed in the European theater. At 1100 hours, the ground assault began anyway. The Rhino tanks rolled forward, toward the hedgerows that had killed thousands of their brothers. Everything depended on whether a New York liquor salesman's sketch could do what the entire United States Army couldn't. The first Sherman hit the hedgerow at 15 miles per hour, the tusks dug in, roots snapped, earth exploded over the turret, and the tank came through level, gun on target, belly protected, ready to fight. German defenders who'd been waiting for another easy kill found themselves buried in debris or staring down a tank barrel. Then came the next tank and the next. Across the entire front, Rhino tanks were punching through hedgerows that had held the army for 6 weeks, hundreds of them, then thousands. Captured German soldiers couldn't understand what had happened. They asked their captors, "How did you get the tanks through the hedges?" General Fritz Bayerlein commanded the Panzer Lehr Division, one of Germany's elite armored units. After Cobra, Bayerlein described his front lines as looking like the face of the moon. His final assessment, his division had been finally annihilated. The defense that had bled the American army for 6 weeks collapsed in 48 hours. Before the Rhino, advances were measured in yards per day. After the Rhino, miles. On July 25th, the German left flank crumbled. By the end of July, American forces had broken into Brittany. They turned toward Paris. The stalemate was over. The race had begun. Look at where this started. Steel obstacles on the beaches placed by Rommel to destroy Allied landing craft. That German steel was salvaged, reshaped, and turned into the weapon that broke the German defense. The Bocage was supposed to bleed America dry. Instead, the death trap became a doorway, and it wasn't opened by Pentagon engineers or generals with stars on their shoulders. Curtis Cullen received the Legion of Merit, pinned on his chest by Omar Bradley himself. But Cullen never claimed sole credit. He talked about Robert's original idea, about Lieutenant Litton's engineering help, about the ordnance crews who worked 48-hour shifts. He was uncomfortable with fame, uncomfortable being singled out for something his team had built together. The device was officially called the Cullen Hedgerow Cutter. Soldiers just called it the Rhino. The hedgerows are still there. You can visit them today. They're quiet now, peaceful. But in July 1944, one stupid idea on one sketch on scrap paper helped win a war. Sometimes the best solutions don't come from generals or engineers. They come from a sergeant with a pencil and a private who refused to believe some problems can't be solved.